Hey guys. This is part 8 of What If Naruto and Sasuke became friends a few years early. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 23. As the sun shined through his window, Naruto squinted, rubbing his eyes and sitting up as he yawned into his hand. Last night had been fun. Exhausting, sure, they'd wrapped bouquets well past any reasonable time frame, but fun in its own way. It was always nice for the four of them to get time to talk, especially with how hard that had been getting since they'd become real ninja. He stretched his arms above his head, trying to shake off some of the grogginess he was already feeling. As he looked towards his left, he couldn't help but notice a small toad sitting on his pillow, perhaps an inch or so away from where his head had been a minute or two ago. It riveted at him. Huh. He thought to himself simply. This is a pretty weird dream. He reached out and touched the creature with his left hand, poking it in the cheek. It riveted in response. I'm getting this odd feeling that I'm not dreaming. He reached over and gingerly took the toad in both hands, causing it to ribbit once more, and walked over to his door. It didn't fight with him as he did, which he felt was a bit odd on principle. Opening the door with one hand, he walked down the steps to the bottom of the apartment complex, and then placed the frog in a small flower patch he found. Well, it's been fun, tiny frog. Naruto wished the amphibian well, before turning back around and heading out towards the hospital, where they'd all agreed to meet last night. But I've got places to be, so have a good life, I guess. A second later, he felt a weight on his shoulder, and turned his head to see that the toad had taken up residence upon him. He whispered, still feeling groggy. The toad gave only a single ribbit before seeming to relax, sitting down on his shoulder, and, if he wasn't mistaken, falling asleep. Ugh, Naruto sighed, yawning once more into his hand. I'm too tired for this. Naruto, why is there a frog on your shoulder? Was the first thing he heard as he stepped in to walk next to Sasuke and Sakura. Good question, was his only reply. Naruto, the recently discharged Kakashi, sounded confused as he walked over to the three of them. Why is there a frog on your shoulder? Good question, the three members of Team 7 answered. Kakashi stared at them all a bit oddly. Why do I feel like you all rehearsed that? Because we did, Sakura answered simply. Their teacher laughed, covering his mouth with his left hand as he looked back at the clock on the wall behind him. Well, we've got a few hours. I'd like to be able to see how far you guys have come while I was away. How about we get some light training in? Pass. Sakura waved her hand, looking deathly pale. I've got to go meet Enko-sensei at 12, and I refuse to train before training again. I'm fairly sure I'd just die. I'm down, Sasuke said as he raised his hand. Same here, Naruto exclaimed. Alright, then we can meet up at the third training ground in. Actually, Kakashi, I'm afraid I'll have to veto that. Everyone turned towards the sound of the new voice, and Naruto's eyes widened as he laid eyes upon the tallest man he'd ever seen. He was a veritable white-maned giant, though the disarmingly easy smile on his face made him look much more friendly than he otherwise would have. Oh, Master Jiraiya? Kakashi asked, smiling back at the man under his mask. What are you doing here? Here to get an entirely new set of problems, the man said, rolling his eyes as he smiled back at their sensei. Naruto wanted to ask what that was supposed to mean, but before he could, the frog from his shoulder was snatched away. Thanks for the hard work, the giant said to the small amphibian in his hand. The creature gave a small ribbit in response, before the new ninja opened up his coat and pocketed the toad. Hey! That was my frog! Naruto exclaimed, finding himself weirdly annoyed to have lost his companion for all of 30 minutes. First off, it's a toad. The man named Jiraiya spoke, kneeling down in front of him and still, rather annoyingly, managing to be taller than Naruto was. And second off, it's my toad. It was sleeping on my pillow. It was not sleeping, it was doing its job as a guardian and protecting you. It wasn't guarding anything. All it was doing was getting its dirty mucus on my bed. That was an unfortunate side effect of it guarding you, the giant exclaimed, before seemingly realizing that he was arguing with a 12-year-old. Anyways, I'm actually going to have to cancel that training, Kakashi, on account of having to take this brat myself. Naruto exclaimed, turning towards his teacher with a scornful expression. So the Hokage finally has you stepping in, eh? Yeah, annoyingly enough, he called me up last night after I finished that covert op, said it was finally time. Sheesh, he couldn't have waited until I had a bit of time with my own students? Sorry about that. Hold on, Naruto shouted, causing the two to look back at him oddly. Just what the hell are you talking about? Kakashi-sensei, are you really gonna abandon me again? A small look of guilt passed by the Scarecrow's face as he held his hands up before him. Honestly, Naruto, it really is just a string of bad luck for me. I fully intend to teach all of you as soon as I can, but the timings just haven't been lining up all that well. Naruto shot the man a disappointed glare. And besides, Master Jiraiya is one of the strongest ninja to ever exist. He's more capable than I, surely, to teach you some super powerful jutsu. Sakura pounded her fist into her hand, making a small aha. As she did, I knew I remembered your name. You're one of the 3 Sannin, aren't you? Wait, like Orochimaru Sannin? Jiraiya sighed at that, running a hand through his hair and whining under his breath about how he always got forgotten. Yes, like Orochimaru Sannin. Naruto blinked. And you want to teach me? Want is a strong word. Naruto turned back towards Kakashi, bowing slightly before him. It's been an honor, Kakashi former-sensei. Hey, Anko-sensei? Sup? Do you think maybe you could teach me some sort of strong or secret jutsu? Anko turned back towards her student, a bit curious. Why the sudden interest? Sakura gripped her shorts in her hands, crumpling them as she did. It might sound stupid. Nearly everything sounds stupid when you put it into words. Anko spoke, an easy smile falling into place as she leaned back, lying down on the ground below her and gazing up at the cloudy sky. So spill, what kind of stupid thing have you got for me today? You know, you're not a very nice person. You're just now figuring this out? Sakura smirked as she laid back as well, letting go of her pants and letting her hands spread out to the side, like she was trying to make a snow angel in the dead of summer. Naruto and Sasuke, they're both getting one-on-one training with some pretty crazy guys. But especially Naruto. He's getting taught by Lord Jiraiya of all people. I don't know if I'd call him Lord, but sure. I can't help but think that Naruto and Sasuke are going to learn some super powerful new jutsu, and totally wreck the exams, all the while I'm stuck behind, once again. The girl sighed as she finished explaining, letting the silence give way to the wind as it coursed through their tiny clearing, rustling the leaves, and sending many to spiral towards the earth. They'd decided to head to the 7th training ground, which, aside from being more hill-infested than the 3rd, largely shared its content with the latter. They'd chosen a rather open clearing where they could easily spar, but one that still had a few hills. Anko had said that such a formation would be good to practice around, as it got Sakura used to fighting in different environments. It was a beautiful area, marred slightly by her own gloomy atmosphere. Sakura heard the sound of footsteps coming towards her and turned to her right to see Anko walking over, sitting down a foot or so away from her and reaching out with her hand. The Jonin lightly bopped her on the nose. Hey, come on, the woman complained. That wasn't stupid at all. What? Anko smiled reassuringly. You said that was going to be stupid, and yet here you are, having a legitimate concern. She glared at her, but the woman only laughed in response, standing up and offering her hand out for Sakura to do the same. After another second or so to get herself ready, she took the hand, and let Anko haul her to her feet. Look, from what I've been able to gather from talking to you, getting left behind is kind of a big fear for you. Sakura whined slightly under her breath, but conceded the point. But honestly, you don't have to worry so much. You're strong, truly. The woman walked up to her, drew a kunai out of her back pocket, and handed it to her. Now come on, let's spar, and then, after that, I'll teach you something cool. Sakura's eyes lit up as she looked up at the woman, smiling despite her earlier mood. The clouds in the sky seemed to part, ever so slightly. Sasuke couldn't help but be slightly uncomfortable as he stood across from Kakashi. He had nothing against the man, truly. In fact, given the chance to know him better, Sasuke was fairly sure they would have a much better relationship. Unfortunately, it seemed like every time the man was going to open up to them, something happened. Either they were attacked, or someone got turned into a demonic beast, or he overused his Manjikyu Sharingan and had to be hospitalized. The Manjikyu Sharingan. Sasuke thought as he readied his weapon, watching his teacher do the same. Just how did you acquire such a thing, Kakashi Hatake? Back in the Land of Waves, he'd held off on asking about the man's Sharingan. Both because he hadn't wanted to make things awkward, the man hadn't seemed like he wanted to tell them where he got it, and also because he'd, admittedly, been a bit scared. All the information he had about the Manjikyu came from his brother, and that information was far from good. Even if he was fairly sure that the man hadn't murdered anyone to get it, there was a part of him that just couldn't be satisfied with that. We'll make this relatively simple, Kakashi called out, spinning his kunai on his finger. You go all out, I'll counter it. Don't expect to beat me, but feel free to try. Right. Sasuke called back, still a bit distracted. Still, Sasuke thought. A Manjikyu on its own means that the user, or former user, killed someone close to them. Was it Kakashi's pain, or the owner's own that led to that eye's evolution? He wondered idly as he and Kakashi began their duel, immediately drawing on his Sharingan as Kakashi had told him to, going all out from the very start. If what Itachi said is true, then one would have to kill their closest friend to achieve it. Did Kakashi commit such a sin? The two of them fought for a few minutes, Sasuke giving ground almost the entire time, despite the fact that he possessed a 3-tomo Sharingan. Every time he thought he had the man, he was blasted back by some unknown jutsu, or he was grabbed from behind by a shadow clone, or the Kakashi he caught turned out to be a mere log. It wasn't long before he was knocked back for the first time, already feeling the aches and pains of the day course through him. Well, it's good to see how much you've improved, Sasuke. He let out a groan as he sat up, rubbing his arm where he'd been struck. It was already bruising, though that was, quite honestly, normal for all of them. Still, the pain in his ribs had died down considerably. So, the medical ninjas did a good job? Yeah, they did. Sasuke answered, running his hand down his side, and pushing lightly against where his ribs had been broken by Orochimaru. There was a dull pain, but it was minuscule compared to what it had been. I'm just glad I'll be able to fight next month. Yeah, well, even still, you've got to return to the hospital so they can continue treatments. The medical ninjas are amazing, but even they can't fix a break in a single trip. Yeah, I know. Sasuke waved his hand, dismissing the man's concerns. Trust me, Naruto and Sakura have already drilled that into me. I don't need you to do it too. Kakashi laughed, raising his hand to his mouth to try and muffle it slightly. After a few seconds, he retook his same position, holding his kunai out to Sasuke. You know how to copy jutsu with that Sharingan, correct? Yeah, I'm guessing you want me to do so? Yep. Come at me anytime, I'll give you a few new techniques to copy with that eye of yours. Sasuke smirked, feeling confidence course through him, even if, in the back of his head, he knew he couldn't really beat Kakashi. He charged forward. It was a while later before Sasuke fell to the ground, entirely spent. Kakashi had, true to his word, been an opponent far beyond his ability. The man's experience proved to be too much, even for the 3-tomo that had grown in his Sharingan. Well, did you get some good jutsu out of it at least? Sasuke looked over at the man, feeling a bit of annoyance pass through his gaze. The older man laughed when he saw it, sitting down next to him and offering a small bottle of water, which the Uchiha accepted gratefully. He took great gulps, downing the entire thing in less than 10 seconds, gasping as he tore it away from his lips. I was able to copy a few water-style jutsu, along with a single wind style, but I'm not sure how any of those are supposed to help me. Sasuke thought with a small frown as he panted. I certainly don't specialize in either of those types, so why should I learn them? You know, after that much exercise, you're supposed to pace yourself. Kakashi's eyebrow was raised, showing perhaps a hint of amusement. Drink in moderation, and all that jazz. Shut up. He breathed out, taking deep, rasping breaths as he tried to regain his energy. You took maybe 3 hits the entire day, and you sit over here lecturing me. Took 3 hits? Kakashi smirked down at him, looking incredibly smug. Sasuke, I let you have 3 hits. He glared at the man, but couldn't refute the words, even if he wanted to. You must kill your closest friend. Itachi's words rang through him, as they often did, and as he looked up at his teacher, headband drawn down over his left eye, he couldn't quite resist the temptation to ask. How did you get that Sharingan, sensei? The inquiry seemed to shock the man, for he almost immediately sat down, eye a bit wide as he looked towards Sasuke. No. His eyes aren't looking at me. Sasuke realized. They're looking through me. From a friend. Kakashi admitted after the silence grew overbearing. A guy named Obito Uchiha. Sasuke quickly searched for the name in his memory, but it came up blank. I can't say I've ever heard of him. Kakashi breathed out in a way that could have been perceived as a laugh. Yeah, you wouldn't have. The Uchiha were never kind to their black sheep. Sasuke waited for the man to continue, looking up at him with a curious expression. Kakashi must have seen it, too, for he laughed again, this time more alive than before. You look like you expect me to elaborate. It would certainly help me trust you more, Sasuke admitted, getting a look of confusion in response. That Manjiki Sharingan you possess, I know how one gets it. Kakashi seemed to be saddened by those words, as if Sasuke had somehow lost some small bit of innocence because of that knowledge, but it had never mattered to him. The day his entire clan had been slaughtered was the day he'd become an adult. I suppose there isn't much reason to hide it. Kakashi seemed to conclude a few seconds later, sighing as he sat down next to a large tree, bracing himself against it. But be warned that it's a long and sad story. That's fine. Sasuke spoke a second later. I'll still listen. Kakashi smiled, before, seemingly content, he began to tell his story. It was an awfully long time ago, at the dawn of the Third Shinobi World War. Zaku walked without feeling as he silently flowed through the Leaf Village's streets. His face was pale, paler than he felt it had been in a long time, and his right arm burned, as if the entire limb had fallen asleep. Go to Kintsuchi and dispose of her. Orochimaru's words rang through his head, even a day after they'd been spoken to him. He and Dosa had been given 2 days to kill Kin, meaning that tonight, for better or worse, would be the moment of truth. And Zaku still couldn't figure out what it was he wanted. He looked up in a daze, noting the sun had finally fallen from the sky, and knowing, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he wasn't ready for what was to come. The 3 of them, Dosu, Kin, and him, had been given 3 rooms at a small apartment complex in the back of the Leaf Village. It was quiet, but it served their purposes well enough, and acted as a decent cover for anyone sniffing around their information. See? The room seemed to say. Just your average genin team. He felt that, under normal circumstances, he maybe laughed at his own joke. At the moment, he barely even breathed. I have to make my decision. Not just eventually, but soon. That thought terrified him. He was perhaps a block away from their apartments, and even if he wanted nothing more than to run away, his feet wouldn't stop carrying him forward, as if silently telling him that he had no choice, no other option than to face this head-on. I already knew that. Zaku thought to himself. No need to reiterate it. He found himself suddenly standing before the apartment stairs, climbing them without really meaning to. He found himself at their floor, walking down the hallway towards whatever awaited them all. He found himself in front of Kin's room, staring into Dosa's eyes. Yo. His partner spoke quietly, almost whispering. He tried to muster up the energy to say something, anything, but found that words simply wouldn't form. Instead, he nodded. Yeah. Dosa said a second later, seemingly grasping what it was he wanted to communicate. I feel the same way. As he contemplated what to do, Zaku couldn't help but idly notice a frog, sitting gingerly atop the steel railing. It seemed to be staring right at them. I suppose there's nothing left to do, other than proceed. Dosu spoke after a while, moving his hand over to the door. It stopped after a second, hesitating, before, finally, plunging down and knocking 4 times. The few seconds that followed seemed to last an eternity to Zaku. Time stood still, the birds in the small park behind them no longer chirped. The insects stopped their calls, and the winds themselves seemed to halt. And then the door opened, and a breath Zaku hadn't known he'd been holding seemed to explode out of him, and he nearly fell right where he was standing. "Oh, hey you two." Kin spoke simply, wearing not her mission outfit, but one that was, instead, rather girlish in appearance. It was a simple dress, one which seemed to prefer comfort over style, but even still gave off an elegant air. "Need something?" Any words he could have spoken seemed to catch not in his throat, but in his head. What was there to say to someone you were told to kill? "Just do it now." A primal part of him cried out. "It'll hurt less if you kill her now. Get it over with." He didn't so much as move, though luckily for him, Dosu did. "Yeah, actually, would you mind if we came in? There were some developments in the plan that we wanted to go over with you." Kin's eyes widened momentarily, before she smiled subtly, stepping back and, effectively, inviting them in. The moment her back was turned, Zaku saw Dosu begin to move. A concealed kunai, one which he'd kept beneath his coat, was drawn, and in an instant, was halfway to Kin's unsuspecting form. Once more, time seemed to stand still. "Isn't this what you want?" A voice in his head seemed to reason with him. "You get to survive, and you don't even have to dirty your hands. Just let Dosu do it." That's true." The knife began to move once more, flowing through the air slowly, yet surely. "I could, just, let it happen." The knife inched ever closer. Yeah, that's perfect. RD. I'll just. Ward. Sit back and watch her die." "Coward!" His hand shot out, gripping Dosu's wrist with such a fervor that for a moment he feared he'd broken it. The boy turned towards him, eyes wide and filled with confusion and fury, but Zaku wouldn't give him a moment. "Hey, Kin?" he called out to the girl before them. Instantly, Dosu's eyes widened extremely, and he drew his weapon back, pocketing it once more as Kin turned back to look at the two of them, eyes curious. "What's up? When'd you get that dress?" Zaku asked. "I don't think I've seen you wear it before." "Oh, this?" The girl performed a tiny motion that made the dress spin ever so slightly, smiling embarrassedly as she did. "I bought it with the pay I'd been saving up over the last few months. I know I probably shouldn't have, but I saw it in the shopping district a few blocks from here, and just couldn't get my eyes off it." "Heh, I guess you've been enjoying it around here?" He spoke as innocently as he could, stepping into the space and, more importantly, between Kin and Dosu. The apartment wasn't particularly large, perhaps the space of your average living room. It did, however, have a tiny kitchen in the corner, and 2 rooms off to the back, which looked to be a bathroom and a bedroom. There were very few personal touches in the space at all, largely due to the fact that the rooms, aside from functioning as places to sleep, went largely unused. "Yeah, it's had its ups and downs, namely me almost dying in that crappy forest, but other than that, I've actually been enjoying it here a lot." The girl smiled, before turning back around and walking into the makeshift kitchen in the back of the space. "How long are you guys staying? Would you like anything to drink?" "No," Dosu began, finally entering the room. "We won't be staying very." "I'll take green tea, if you have it," Zaku called out, trying to ignore the death glare that Dosu was giving him. He received a small laugh back from Kin. "All right, 1 green tea. Dosu, you good then?" "Yes," Dosu said, looking Zaku directly in the eye with a cold stare. "I'm fine, thank you." "All right, just give me a few minutes then, I'll bring that right out." "Thanks," Zaku called out, before turning to look back at his teammate. "What the hell are you trying to pull?" Dosu whispered aggressively at him, leaning towards him in the small chair. We have our assignment, do we not? Why stop me from accomplishing it? Because that's far too cold, Zaku wanted to say. Because she's just a kid like us, stuck in a bad situation, and robbed of the chance of a normal life because of Orochimaru's whims. Because she's our teammate, someone we've been stuck with for almost a year now. Who knows? Zaku said instead, leaning back into his chair and thinking at a mile a minute. Alright, I've bought myself some time to think, but other than that, what do I have? His thoughts were restless as he watched Kin try to prepare his drink, at first trying to make a single cup, but ultimately failing, and with a small pout upon her face, resorting to making an entire pot. The moment Kin gets over here, Dosu's going to try and kill Kin again, and at that point, I need to pick a side. You can't pick a side. You have to somehow say them both. It was the same voice from earlier, the one that had called him a coward. Only now could he tell just who it was. Yeah. He called out to the voice. I know, Reese. Trust in me. A warm feeling covered him, before disappearing. He knew deep down that the Reese he'd spoken to wasn't the real one. That boy had died many years ago. But the ideal of Reese that he held in his heart, the kind-hearted boy who would never betray his friends, still held him to that same standard. He wouldn't allow himself to fail those close to him. Not again. Sheesh, finally. Kin's voice interrupted his thoughts. It seemed she'd finished preparing the tea, which meant he was out of time. Sorry that took so long. Kin called over to them, laughing as she did. I tried to make a single cup for you, but that was a disaster, so, well, long story short, I made a full pot, so if you end up wanting a refill, rest assured I've got you covered. Am much obliged. Zaku spoke, his voice once again sounding weak. You alright? Kin seemed to pick up on it, looking at him with a vague sense of concern. Yeah, just got something in my throat. He took the tea in front of him and gave it a small sip, careful not to obscure his vision. He was keeping track of Dosu out of the corner of his vision, but the boy didn't look to be making any moves. He was watching the two of them carefully as well, and when their eyes met briefly, he turned away, instead watching the wall behind them. Alright. Zaku pondered. What do I say? So, what did you guys want to tell me? Dosu's posture changed. He went from completely relaxed to ready to jump up at a moment's notice. It struck Zaku immediately that he had mere seconds, if that, to act. And so he went for, perhaps, the riskiest of all the moves he could have pulled. Orochimaru wants you dead. The room went deadly silent, as both Kin and Dosu turned to look at him with eyes as wide as saucers, though obviously for quite different reasons. What? Kin spoke up, seemingly at a loss for words as she reached behind her, reaching for a kunai that wasn't there. What are you talking about? Last night Dosu tried to stop him, grabbing at his arm and giving him a look, but he shook the other boy off. Last night, we were called by Orochimaru. He promised us the rank of Chunin, and greater protections to go along with it, and all we had to do was kill you to do it. The girl seemed to barely process that, her hands shaking as she reached down with one and took a drink of her tea, eyes frantically panning across the both of them, and towards the door in front of her. Perhaps it was the desperation, but she didn't try and mask her intended escape route very well at all. Why tell me this, huh? The girl's voice suddenly became aggressive, drawing a kitchen knife from the counter behind her and holding it out towards the two of them. Rubbing it in my face before you kill me. Because I want the three of us to escape together. Once more all eyes were on him. Both of his teammates had stopped struggling, had stopped looking like they could attack one another at any moment. They looked towards him with a look that he couldn't quite describe. It was at once hope and despair. The hell? Kin muttered quietly to herself, collapsing on the chair below her, and letting the knife in her hand fall from her grip. You could have started with that. The hell are you playing at, Zaku? He turned towards Dosu, who was looking at him like he was insane. To be fair to the man, he could understand how he might sound it. I'm saying that we can escape. Right here, right now. We can free ourselves from Orochimaru's grasp, and side ourselves with people who will protect us from him. What the? Zaku, we're criminals. Dosa smacked his hand to his stomach, directly over his heart. We aren't going to be taken in by anyone, let alone the Leaf Village. Wait, Kin began, disbelief flooding into her voice. You were planning on defecting to the Leaf? Yeah, that's the idea, he admitted. Dosa stopped for a second, before, with a small chuckle, he began to laugh wildly, almost crazily. And just why the hell would they let us do that? The boy shouted, fury, and a small bit of madness working its way across his face. Even supposing that no one catches us as we make our way to the Hokage's tower, which they certainly will, what do we have to offer them to take us in? Last night's meeting. Dosa's face went from crazed to contemplative, in a matter of moments, suddenly considering the new element he hadn't seen before. If we approach them with that information, I think the Hokage might choose to shelter us. Zaku spoke, eyes hardened with resolve. But, this time, it was Kin speaking up. What happens if we give him this information, and then he just kills us anyways? I considered that, but I'm willing to bet that won't happen. Zaku spoke confidently, now ready to confront the two of them with the full plan. Orochimaru has always called the third Hokage soft. In terms of general policy, and even just demeanor, we've all seen him at the Chunin exam site, he seems like an upstanding man. I think that if we came to him with all of this, he'd help us. Evidence. Dosu spoke, massaging his skull with his hands. What evidence do you have that he will? Last month, he took in 2 drifters from the Mist Village. Zabuza Momochi and his son. Zaku spoke, using some of the intel he'd gathered as part of Orochimaru's initial mission. I don't know why, but if he was willing to offer a position for one as bloodstained as the Demon of the Mist, then surely for kids like us, he'd be even more forgiving. Dosa laughed, but it was a sedated, quiet thing. More conjecture, no evidence. The boy muttered under his breath. We're going to die, and it's going to be your fault. So, you'd rather Kin die than risk your own life? He asked, knowing the answer. Yes. Dosa looked up at him, eyes narrowed. I would. Coward. Dosa laughed at that, a dry, mirthless laugh that rang completely hollow. Call me what you want, but at the end of the day, I survive. Dosa spoke as he looked towards Kin. Whatever else happens, happens. Try it, and I'll stop you. Zaku spoke as the boy leaned forward, about to try and cut Kin down once again. The girl seemed to realize that her life was once more endangered, for she took the knife off of the floor and held it in front of her, moving it from one of them to the other, silently threatening to both of them. It's always about Kin, isn't it? Dosa spoke dryly as he turned towards him, eyes narrowed in anger. Your little crush seems to have really flared up these past few weeks. Zaku sighed as Kin gave him an odd look, but he ignored her. Whatever the other two maybe thought about his own interests didn't matter right now. I'm not going to lose anyone, never again. I promised myself that. Zaku's words seemed to confuse the other two, but they kept listening anyways. Each of us grew up on the streets. We were orphans, outcasts, thrown bits and scraps and expected to make a life out of them. Dosa snorted. So what? So that means if we're planning on surviving, we need to stick together. Bullshit. The boy uttered, standing up and moving towards him. I survived just fine on my own. I made it for 10 years before that bastard snatched me up, and I didn't need anyone's help. And what now? Zaku exclaimed louder than he'd meant to. What happens when you survive this whole ordeal? But the two of us, he gestured to Kin and himself, are dead. Do you really think you'll be able to keep staying alive in that bastard circle? I've done just fine so far, have I not? And do you think you've done that alone? He pressured, standing up and getting in the other boy's face. Do you honestly think that the 3 of us working together isn't what led to our success? The other boy headbutted him, knocking him back into his chair, and for a second, there was no noise, only the harsh breathing of the both of them, with Kin sitting in the back of the room, her blade still raised towards the two of them, untrusting. You're so full of shit, Zaku. Dosa massaged his head where theirs had collided, looking down at him with disdain. When you fought that bug kid, wasn't survival the thing that pushed you on? Wasn't that what let you get back up? He tried to remember back to those moments, but everything was so hazy. What had it been that brought him out of that haze? Get up! Dosa's voice. Reese. No. He responded simply, looking up at him and smirking lightly, despite the pain pounding in his skull. I got up for the two of you. Dosa's eyes went wide, even as he took a step backwards, snarling. Bullshit. It's not bullshit. He shouted back, rising, and meeting the boy once again. When I was nearly dying on the ground, it was your damned shouting that brought me back. And when I got caught in that swarm, it was the thought that you guys would get hurt that let me power through and fire off that last shot, so don't you dare tell me that what we have means nothing, because I know damn well that isn't true. Dosu stumbled backwards as Sokka pushed forwards, tripping over the chair, and landing in a heap on the ground. The two of them panted, even as Kin stood up and backed away slightly, never once putting the knife away, but no longer pointing it towards the two of them. You may be able to survive on your own, sure. Sokka conceded that point, taking a deep breath. But I'll be damned if you wouldn't hate it the entire way. Dosu didn't speak from his position on the floor, instead covering his eyes with his arm and panting as quietly as he could. I'm going to the Hokage. I'm going to get away from Orochimaru, and I'm going to live the life that I want to live. Sokka held his hand out to the boy, gazing down at him with a small smile. And I'd like it if the two of you came too. Dosa said nothing for a few seconds, breathing slowly as he let his arm fall to the side, looking over at Kin with an expression Sokka couldn't quite fathom. When he finally looked away, it was to lock eyes with him, examining every part of him. You're an idiot, the boy supplied simply. Perhaps. He smiled. You're going to get us all killed. Maybe, Zaku admitted. But in the long run, I'd bet that my plan has a higher survival rating than yours. Dosu turned, putting his weight on his left arm as he pushed himself up, standing and looking back over towards Kin once more, as if, for the final time, considering simply killing her once more. He seemed to dismiss the thought a second later, as he turned back towards Zaku with a small conviction playing in his eyes. All right, fine. Dosa sighed. Just this once, I'll bet on your ideals. He smiled at that, letting out a massive breath of relief as he looked towards Kin and smiled at her. The girl returned it, though hers was more sedated, still filled with residual fear from the entire night's events. Kin, go get your equipment and get dressed, we don't have a ton of time. Sokka ordered simply, before a hand on his shoulder brought him out of his fervor. I'm sorry. Dosa spoke, sounding a tad annoyed. I don't remember promoting you to leader of this team. He laughed a bit nervously, raising his hands in mock surrender. Kin, follow Sokka's instruction. The girl's eyes narrowed as she sighed. Right, yeah? She disappeared into her room for a few minutes, and came out in her traditional ninja garb, a fused Senbon already strapped to the side of her thigh. She nodded once to the both of them, and they followed behind Dosu as they walked towards the entrance. All right, we'll take back alleys and side streets all the way to the Hokage's office. We want to go as long as possible without being spotted, if we get spotted at all. The boy opened the door, still turned towards the both of them. In the event we do get seen, we. How interesting, just what could you mean by that? It was as if the temperature around them dropped 15 degrees in a single second. Chills shot up Sokka's body as he looked at the figure stood before them. Garbed in his traditional medical ninja outfit, he didn't cut much of an imposing figure. But as the right-hand man of Orochimaru, Kabuto Yakushi wasn't to be underestimated. My. Kabuto's eyes seemed to glint in the fragile moonlight, and his teeth, bared to the world, seemed terribly sharp as he smiled at the three of them. What do we have here? Chapter 24. Get down! Zaku trusted Dosa's order, dropping to the floor as a poisoned kunai was directly overhead, impacting against a wooden support pillar to a nearby shop. We're not losing him. Zaku felt like pointing out as the three of them ducked into another alleyway. Yeah, well, we weren't exactly prepared for this. Dosu shot back, drawing his last remaining smoke bomb out from his pouch and chucking it back the way they came, watching as it exploded and filled the entrance with billowing gas. I hate to bring this up, but weren't you there to kill me? Kin shouted at the two of them, eyes narrowed in an odd mixture of petty anger and real fear. Shouldn't you have stocked up on supplies for that? Dosa didn't say anything for a moment as they watched the smoke, and seeing nothing emerge, ran out the alley's other end and into another side street. In my defense, Dosa breathed out, panting as they ran as hard as they could. I was planning a sneak attack. Really? Kin whispered annoyedly, before swearing almost silently as they ducked behind a small food stall, seemingly avoiding their pursuer's gaze as he flew past them and onto a roof just beyond them, surveying the entire area. Can we not argue about this right now? Zaku called the both of them out, peeking around their small stall, and seeing Kabuto looking the other way, giving the two of them the signal to move. They'd managed to escape Kin's apartment by way of a paper bomb, but after that, they'd been left with next to nothing as they snaked their way through the Leaf Village, trying desperately to avoid Kabuto's poison knives and shuriken. Luckily, it was the dead of night, well past the time when the streets were filled with people, and so their escape path hadn't been through countless people. They traveled as a unit, using the experience Orochimaru had given them for missions just like this one, infiltrations into well-guarded areas, that were, in essence, very similar to trying not to be spotted by someone trying to kill you. Their goal was much the same as well. They reckoned that if Orochimaru thought he could challenge the Hokage directly, he would have done it already. Thus, if they could make it to the Hokage's office, they'd be in the clear. Kabuto wouldn't follow the three of them inside. Still, there were definitely some small differences in their strategy. Unlike being confined in an enemy base, or a fortress, they didn't have a set route to the target. If they took a route around the entire Leaf Village that still managed to get them inside the Hokage's office, then that was a success, no matter how long it took. All they needed to do to win was live. Ah, there you three are! Which was proving a bit difficult with him on their trail. Kabuto jumped down in front of them, immediately drawing multiple poison blades into his fingers and flinging them at the three of them, forcing them to dodge away from them and, in the process, scatter slightly. Zaku watched as the young adult briefly surveyed his options, before smiling maliciously as he charged towards Kin, drawing another blade and bringing it down. It was blocked by the backside of Dosa's gauntlet, the boy launching an ear-rending blast of sound out of it a second later, forcing Kabuto backwards. In the interim moment as the bastard once more considered his options, Zaku thrust his left arm outwards and forced air through it. Pain shot up the entire limb, but the odd mix of chakra and air still fired, knocking Kabuto back into the small stall behind him. He motioned towards the other two to run, and they put up no arguments there, rushing through the empty streets as fast as they could, just barely dodging another kunai as it impacted into the wall beside Zaku's own face. "Keep going!" Dosa shouted, motioning towards the horizon beyond them, where a lone building seemed to tower over all of the others. "We're about halfway there. We can make it!" "Of course, we're going to make it!" Zaku shouted, smiling despite the horrifying dread coursing through him. "You think I went to all that effort to save you assholes for us to die here? I'd really like to draw the conversation back to the fact that you were going to kill me," Kin shouted, pushing Zaku forward as a dozen Senbon thudded into the ground. "You're just now getting upset about this. How could I not? Focus, people!" Dosa shouted as he grabbed them both by the arms, forcing them against the wall as the earth jutsu rained down before them. "Have this argument when we're all safe and sound, not before." "All right." They both answered back. "We've still got." The boy stopped speaking as they rounded the corner, barely retracting his head in time to dodge the raging torrent of water that shot past it. Dosa dropped back slightly, breathing hard from the near-death experience. "We've still got a few blocks to go, don't lose focus, but don't let that guy scare you. He's one, and we're three. We don't necessarily have the advantage, but neither does he." Dosa signaled them, pointing two fingers towards the opening, and the three of them charged outwards, the masked boy raising his gauntlet and blasting apart an oncoming stream of water. Kin, on the other hand, brought out two Senbon with little bells attached to them into her left and right hands, and seemed to be heavily focusing on something. "Oh, right," Zaku thought, remembering the girl's abilities. "She barely ever brings it out. I guess I sort of forgot she could use genjutsu." As the three of them ran through the barren street, Kin seemed to slow down minutely. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal normally, but being chased by someone trying to kill you generally limited your options. Oi, Kin! Zaku called back to the girl. Eyes forward. Give me a sec. The girl responded simply, muttering something under her breath. He realized a second later that he probably shouldn't distract her, but still had to charge forward to bat a kunai out of the air, preventing it from striking the girl's backside. Alright, got it. Kin threw the Senbon into the path in front of them, landing on opposite sides of the flanking walls. That should buy us some time. Come on! With that cryptic message, Kin charged forward into the alley she just trapped, running right through as he followed behind her, and Dosu brought up the rear. Zaku heard the sound of his teammate's gauntlet yet again, and assumed that he knocked another jutsu out of the air. Suddenly, the bells hanging off of the Senbon started to give off a faint ringing, and Zaku's vision distorted almost instantly. What? He uttered, feeling nauseous as he took another step, and nearly falling flat on his face. He would have, if not for the hand that reached out and grabbed onto his own, hauling him up and pulling him. He didn't have any idea where they were going, but sticking around those needles seemed like it wouldn't be too good of an idea, so anywhere else was probably preferable. His vision seemed to realign itself as he was dragged even further, and by the time they rounded what he presumed was a corner, he seemed to have regained his bearings fully. Hey, Kin? Dosu spoke, still holding on to Kin's hand and seemingly having gone through the same experience Zaku had. Please warn us next time you do that. Oh, I'm sorry, the girl spoke sarcastically. Did you warn me that you were going to try and kill me? Technically I did. Zaku commented as he raised his hand feebly, nearly vomiting as he brought the same hand over his mouth. Right, well, Kin muttered, blushing embarrassedly. Sorry, I kinda forgot about that. "'S fine. Zaku spoke, looking up and giving his best smile, which came across as more of a glare given how his stomach still rumbled uncomfortably. We should probably get moving though. I don't know how long that'll hold that guy for. Knowing Orochimaru? Dosu responded, looking back with a sigh. I'm fairly sure his right-hand man can handle a fairly simple genjutsu. Right. Kin nodded, and they stepped forward. Dosu took the lead, rounding the corner with his gauntlet raised to block a jutsu, but none came. Alright, we've only got. Dosu observed the skyline, judging the distance they still had to cover by how far away the Hokage's building looked. Probably 4 or 5 blocks to go. We're going to make it, got it? Right. He and Kin shouted, following behind the boy as he took a running jump off of a nearby fruit stand, running onto the roof of the building just in front of them, and dashing towards their goal with a feeling of hope encompassing them. Almost there. His treacherous brain muttered quietly. Zaku panted as he hopped to the next building, leaping the distance in a single bound and rolling as he landed. Almost there. Kin shouted something from behind them, and even if either he or Dosu could hear quite what it was, judging by the girl's tone, it was nothing good. Almost there. There were only a dozen or so more roofs between them and the Hokage's office. We're going to make it! And then Dosu cried out, falling to the ground, and rolling to a stop, clutching his abdomen as he did. Dosu! He called out in a panic, ignoring his instinct to turn and face their assailant as he ran towards his fallen comrade. Zaku, watch out! He turned just in time to dodge the incoming jutsu, a stone flying at him at a speed that would have easily sent it straight through him. He dodged a few shuriken as well, stepping back into a position just in front of Dosu, guarding the boy as he desperately tried to draw breath on the floor below him. Kin joined him a moment later, Senbon drawn up into her fingers, though judging by the way her head moved on a swivel, she hadn't been able to locate their attacker. Phew! A confident, malicious voice seemed to echo from all around them. You know, you 3 gave me quite the scare. You very nearly got away. Zaku grit his teeth as Kabuto landed on the roof, standing tall and cocky as he smiled over at the 3 of them. But, well, I suppose everything must come to an end eventually. The man sounded almost disappointed as he took a step forwards, prompting both he and Kin to step back, nearly stepping on the collapsed Dosu in the process. I wouldn't move him if I were you, that would greatly speed up the toxin traveling through him. Anger coursed through him, but Zaku knew he couldn't move. If he did, he gave the ninja before him an easy way in to kill Dosu, and to sow even more rage into the two of them, which would, of course, result in their loss. Still, it certainly didn't feel good to sit there and take the bastard's words, without anything to fire back. If you don't mind, how about the three of you come back with me to see Orochimaru? I'm sure he'd be eager to hear all about this. Kabuto smiled as he took another step forward, but all of a sudden, the young man's face went pale white, and he jumped backwards, not just once or twice, but 5 times, raising his hands up before him to defend against an unseen threat. A second later, a voice cried out, "Fire style, flame bullet!" A raging blast of fire flowed through the air, overwhelming Kabuto's fragile defense and sending the man flying backwards, landing only barely on a rooftop just across from theirs. "Well, well, well," the new figure spoke up, landing just before them and crossing his arms. "Can't say I expected the three of you to turn traitor, but I'm certainly not complaining." "Who the hell are you?" Kin shouted, reaching down and taking a brief glimpse at Dosu's wound, which was beginning to pool blood onto the roof below them. "Me?" The veritable giant spoke in surprise as he turned around, pointing to himself with his index finger, and, when no one seemed to say anything, sighing quietly. "Always the forgotten Sannin. No one ever remembers the frog guy. Who the hell cares about frogs?" Sokka let out quietly. Sorry? Don't be, kid. Everyone's like that." The man sighed again, before turning towards them and smiling widely. "Name's Jiraiya, but most people know me as the Toad Sage." "W8. Kin spoke up, trembling slightly. "Oh, like Sannin Jiraiya?" "Yes, an awful lot like Sannin Jiraiya." The man spoke up, sounding slightly amused. "Now, I'm going to have the two of you carry your unconscious friend here, and get to the Hokage's office. I'll handle this guy." But Zaku couldn't help but feel a modicum of worry in his voice. If this guy couldn't hold Kabuto, then he'd just come after them again when they weren't expecting it. Kabuto's strong, he's not going to go down easily. To that, the giant in front of them only laughed, turning around so his back faced the three of them. "Kid, the last time I ran into Orochimaru, he turned tail and ran away from me." Jiraiya spoke up, laughing as he walked towards his opponent. "This guy?" He pointed towards Kabuto, who even now didn't dare move. "Can't even begin to compare, now get going." Zaku did just that, swallowing the last of his doubt, and grabbing Dosu by the arms, hauling him around and onto his back, and nodding towards Kin when she asked if he'd be able to handle it by himself. And just like that, they were off into the night. And finally, for the first time in half a decade, Zaku felt a small semblance of freedom. Jiraiya watched the three kids go with a smile, their worry for him oddly touching, even if he was fairly sure it was actually worry for themselves that he might blow at protecting them. "Glad they have such confidence in me," Jiraiya muttered, sighing as he turned back towards the boy those three had called Kabuto, and realizing that he vaguely recognized him. "Oh, you're the guy who fought that edgy brat from the Chunin exams." The kid in front of him said nothing, but he noticed the burns on the boy's arms began to heal automatically, just as they had when he'd fought in his Chunin exams battle against the Uchiha kid. "So, what, you have some kind of innate healing?" Once more, the ninja before him didn't speak. Jiraiya could, in a way, respect the boy's silence. He knew he was outclassed, and at the moment, his only goal was getting away without revealing anything else than he already had. Still, it was Jiraiya's goal to prevent that. If he could drag this idiot in for questioning, then they could learn quite a lot about Orochimaru's plans here in Konoha, even more than the three genin from earlier would know about it, being, likely, expendable pieces on a very large board. But the right-hand man of Orochimaru himself? Well, he'd have some answers. Jiraiya charged forwards, extending his hair and letting it fly out, trying to impact into the boy in front of him, and use it almost like a fishing hook to drag him back in. His opponent deftly avoided the attack, firing out 2 kunai in the span of half a second that were effortlessly batted aside with the backs of Jiraiya's gauntlets. As he did, he brought his hair back around and, swinging his head in a circular motion, used the returning momentum like a whip, sending it back towards Kabuto even faster than before. Even still, the boy managed to duck underneath it, drawing a paper bomb out of his pouch and slapping it onto the roof below him, before jumping back and running. Jiraiya swore, running over to the planted explosive and, using his formidable knowledge of sealing arts, reached down and deactivated the weapon before it could go off. They had, after all, still been fighting in a residential area. If the bomb had exploded, then it was very likely that someone could have been injured, or even killed. As he looked back up at where his opponent had been, there was no one to be found. Jiraiya sighed loudly, taking the now inanimate piece of paper and pocketing it. Perhaps the forensics department guys can get some prints off this, Jiraiya reasoned. Not much point since we know who he is, but I suppose it's better than nothing. There was a half-decent chance that, if he really wanted to, he could probably find that boy and track him down. The problem with that, really, was that his opponent didn't care about taking innocent lives in the crossfire, whereas he very much did. Fighting in the city streets would only lead to citizens being hurt. It was, unfortunately, better to let the bastard run home with his tail between his legs. Even if it makes sense in theory, it doesn't make me feel any better. Jiraiya sighed, turning back towards the Hokage's office, and dashing away. I'm dressing the wound, but this poison isn't something I've encountered. Call one of the specialists from the hospital, maybe they've seen it before. He's on his way, but it's going to be a few minutes. Alright, I'll do what I can to stimulate the flow. Kin sat quietly as the medical ninjas rushed around the small room, wrapping bandages around Dosa's torso and extracting the poison-covered kunai, as well as closing the wound faster than any doctors she'd ever seen. It was rather impressive. So, these are the doctors who healed me too, huh? An hour went by before anyone approached them, and when they did, it was a single, older gentleman, the specialist who'd been called in from the hospital. He's in stable condition. The man smiled at them, and whether that was because of a jolly nature, or just trying to keep them reassured, Ken still appreciated it. I regret that I couldn't do more. Even if I am technically a specialist, I wasn't able to extract all of the poison, just most of it. Unfortunately, that means he'll be confined to a bed for the next week, or so. That's fine. Zaku spoke up, not quite smiling at the man, but giving a decent attempt at one. We appreciate the assistance. You're mighty welcome. Honestly, I just wish Lady Tsunade was here. She's the world's foremost expert on poisons. She could have dealt with something of this caliber in half the time I did, and had that kid up and running within a day. Kin vaguely recognized the name, and she combed her mind for more information. Tsunade. She's the last of the three Sannin, right? The doctor nodded, his cheeks crinkling with age as he did. Back in the days of the Second Shinobi World War, Lady Tsunade revolutionized a lot of the medical ninjutsu we use today, including training an awful lot of today's technicians. The man pointed to himself, smiling widely. I was one of her students all those years ago, even if I was a decade or two older than her. Ken smiled tiredly up at the man, listening to him ramble on and on about his older mentor as the hours ticked by. Finally, after more than 10 stories about the war, most of which actually did, begrudgingly, teach her a few things about life and the code of the medical ninjas, an Anbu appeared in front of their group. The Hokage will see you now, were the only words that passed by the woman's lips. She wore a standard Anbu outfit, and her mask depicted a cat, or so Kin thought. Her hair was a vibrant purple, and it billowed out behind her as she walked, leading them up a winding set of stairs, and in front of a simple, yet ornate-looking door. Behave yourselves. The woman spoke as she opened the door, allowing them to step into the Hokage's office. The room itself was, much like the door that led into it, simple, yet it carried a certain dignity to it that made it seem larger than it really was. It was curved inwards, likely due to the cylindrical shape of the building's construction, but it made good use of this, pointing towards the simple desk that resided in the center of the room, upon which sat the Hokage. The man himself looked nothing like a terrifyingly powerful warrior. He seemed, at first glance, to be a rather unimportant old man, the kind that would be seen in the park feeding birds, wasting away their remaining years. Kin could almost see this man having the same daily routine, with the way he stood up with a cane, and walked over to face them with an easy smile set upon his face. "Thank you, Yugao," the man spoke to his umbu, who even now guarded the doorway behind them. "You may leave." "Thank you, sir." "Have a nice night with hate," the man called out in a teasing tone, causing the umbu to jump minutely, before turning back and looking towards the Hokage with what, even behind the mask she wore, Kin could tell was an annoyed expression. The third Hokage laughed easily as the woman flashed away, walking over to his desk and gesturing towards two small, rickety chairs set up in front of it. "You'll have to forgive me. With the short notice, I was unable to prepare you two anything better than these." "Oh, no, that's fine, sir," Zaku muttered quietly, bowing as he finished. The tension that seemed to hang around Kin and Zaku was shattered a second later, as the old man nearly collapsed from laughing, taking a seat in his chair and wiping away a small tear in his eyes. "My apologies, but the two of you have no need to be quite so formal, you know." The Hokage spoke as the two of them sat down. "I know my student has been your leader for a few years now. I'm afraid I must apologize for his actions. He has always been my greatest failure as a master." "It's really no problem at all," Sir Kin mediated, even if she couldn't help but feel the least bit confused. How had such a cold person like Orochimaru originated from this man? Her thought process was interrupted as the door behind them erupted open, and a blond boy, robed in a bright orange jumpsuit, charged into the room, walked right up to the Hokage's desk, and slammed his hands down on it. "Old man," the boy whined. "That frog guy went and disappeared on me again. Do you know where he is? He was supposed to be teaching me how to do a summoning jutsu." "Naruto." The Hokage sighed wearily, even though there was a small smile on his face that didn't fade away. "I believe Jiraiya is downstairs, giving his statement on tonight's events to the umbu." "Huh, did something happen?" "Nothing you need to worry yourself about," the Hokage assured the boy. Naruto, who Kin remembered only then as one of the members of Team 7, the team they'd been sent to eliminate in the Forest of Death, pondered that idea for a moment. Apparently, he had decided that he was far too nosy to leave anything outside of his own authority, because a second later, he turned back to the Hokage and asked, "So, what happened, exactly?" "Naruto, did you not hear me?" "Well, I mean, I did, but I just kinda chose to ignore me?" "Chose to ignore you, yeah?" The Hokage sighed once again, turning back towards the two of them and smiling. "I'm sorry about this, you two. It appears one of our genin is interrupting our meeting." Even this Naruto, who didn't appear to be all that smart, seemed to catch that hint, for he turned back towards them, bowed to apologize, and made to leave. A second later he stopped, turned back around with eyebrows drawn down in contemplation, and walked back over to them, getting right into Zaku's face and examining him closely. Kin's teammate spoke. "Could you not?" The orange ninja screamed, pointing his finger into Zaku's face, and then into hers, as he took a step back. "I knew I recognized you too. You're those guys we fought in the forest." "Yeah, Zaku looked over towards her, giving her a look that clearly screamed, "Help me out here." If it had been Dosu, she might have been a little less willing to offer it, but for Zaku, the guy who'd basically saved her life a few hours ago, she was feeling a bit merciful. "We're sorry about that," she spoke, standing as she did and bowing. "We were given a mission from Orochimaru. We couldn't afford to not complete it." "Oh, right." Naruto turned back to the Hokage, pointing at the two of them. "Oi, old man. We told you these guys work for Orochimaru back during the test. Why are they in your office?" "Well, Naruto, as of a few hours ago, they don't work for Orochimaru anymore." Naruto went quiet for a second, rubbing his chin with his hand. Well, Sakura will be happy, I guess." They sat there for a moment as Naruto rocked back and forth on the balls of his feet, unmoving from his position as he did. Another moment passed before the Hokage cleared his throat, drawing the young boy's attention. "Well, Naruto, we're in the middle of an important meeting, so, if you would." "Would what?" the boy asked, somehow oblivious. "Leave." The Hokage finally came out with it, sighing as the boy gave a loud "oh" before turning around and walking out the door, closing it behind him. As the silence ticked on for a few seconds, the Hokage reached over and grabbed a cup of tea that had been sitting there for quite a while. Kin couldn't help but think it would be rather cold, but a second later, a small flame came to the man's fingers, and as he grabbed the cup, the water once more began to steam. It was a small display, but in that moment, Kin could see just how intimidating the man before her truly was. The level of control he possessed to be able to utilize fire released so freely was immaculate. As the man set his teacup down, he sighed blissfully, letting the evening air from the open window behind his desk course over him. Now he spoke quietly, looking back up to them with a glint in his eye. Where were we? Kabuto stepped inside Orochimaru's makeshift base with a conflicted expression. Those three brats had made their getaway, and now, he'd have to report back to Orochimaru about what had occurred. And yet he walked with no fear. Instead, he walked confidently, elegantly, and with a smile on his face. By the time he reached Orochimaru, he could hardly wait to give his report. Ah, Kabuto. The Sannin spoke as he turned around, smiling over at him as he did. You took longer than I'd expected. My apologies, sir, those three weren't quite as easy to handle as I'd expected. So I've heard. My sources tell me that they've made it to the Hokage's office, and into his protection. This, despite the fact that I gave them crucial information about our plan not 2 days ago. Kabuto was the first to crack, giving off a small snicker, before erupting, laughing as he shook in place. Orochimaru before him cackled madly as well, his shrill voice echoing off the walls. So, that fool Hiruzen actually fell for it then? Orochimaru said, still laughing faintly. Fascinating, though not unexpected, I suppose. It is an awful shame to lose such excellent candidates for the reincarnation jutsu, but I suppose I could make do with some rats from the leaf instead. Even so, there's always a possibility he won't take their information at face value. He could have foreseen this entire thing. Ha! I suppose it is not your fault for misunderstanding, Kabuto, for you have never experienced a war before, given your age. Orochimaru explained, smiling at him in a superior way. He is trapped between two bad choices. Either he ignores their intel entirely, and risks losing his civilians to a backwards assault, or he takes their intel at face value, sending a good half his troops to guard the back half of the village, and leaves the front open. No good options. I see. Kabuto couldn't help but be in awe of his master, to have thought so far ahead. Is this what you had planned for them, even back during the Chunin exams? Well, if they had not performed, then I would simply have killed them as sacrifices. They had to do this of their own accord, after all. I didn't trust them to act in front of the Hokage and his entourage, but right now, they truly believe they've gone over to his side of their own free will. They won't hold back any information they have. In fact, they'll be eager to share it, and in the process, they will force the Hokage to make an impossible choice, which will severely weaken his armies, no matter which he chooses. Kabuto spoke, before his eyes widened, and he turned back towards the man, smiling maliciously. And if our spies report back that he hasn't chosen to reinforce his back, then we attack from behind as well. Orochimaru confirmed. That's truly genius, sir. No, it is not genius. Orochimaru corrected, the smile on his face becoming more casual. Even this plan, despite its strengths, does carry with it weaknesses. We are, after all, confirming for the Hokage that we will be attacking, meaning he will be able to recall ninjas from across the country to reinforce his gates. Our sound ninjas are strong, but they pale in comparison to the military might of the Leaf. Then, pardon my questioning, sir, but what chance do we truly have against them? Why, Kabuto, you wound me. Orochimaru feigned dramatically, as a small snake slithered out of his robe, fell to the floor, and then made its way out of the room. I have plans to counter even that. Jiraiya being here so early certainly changes how we must go about these things. The giant hydra we plan on summoning, for instance, would be easily quelled by him. Adding something else to the mix, however, might make the battle for the gates more interesting. Kabuto couldn't quite help his curiosity on that front, unable to quite follow the man's train of thought. Just what exactly are you planning on doing, sir? Orochimaru turned back towards him, his eyes practically glowing in the pale moonlight, even as a small wound on his thumb began to drip blood onto the ground. Meeting with an old friend. Chapter 25. You did what? Naruto's grin was of shit-eating proportions, practically taking up half of his face as he leaned backwards, as if looking down upon Sasuke like a king would a meager peasant. I said I summoned a giant frog. The boy repeated once more, gripping his chin with one hand, and laughing haughtily under his breath. That frog guy taught me how to a week ago, and just yesterday, I finally mastered it. Sasuke felt that Naruto referring to one of the three great Sannin as that frog guy should probably have been seen as a massive disrespect, but he also felt that the boy wouldn't have truly been himself if he were ever respectful of anyone at all. You learned how to use the summoning jutsu in a week. The Uchiha sputtered, feeling just the smallest bit envious as he looked towards his friend. Just what the hell kind of training is that man giving you? He reached over and took the boy's arm, inspecting it with a quiet vigor as he continued. Did he use drugs? Stimulants? Steroids? Actually, he threw me into a. Naruto stopped midway through his sentence, cleared his throat, and continued. Apparently I'm just a natural. Sasuke could tell that particular sentence was about as truthful as Kakashi's excuses for general tardiness, but chose to simply let it go. All Kakashi taught me was Chidori. Sasuke grumbled a bit under his breath. He hadn't told the boy, but he'd originally agreed to take a break from his training to come and brag to Naruto about how much cooler his jutsu was than Naruto's own. Apparently, his best friend had had a very similar idea. Even still, the park they were sat in was too nice for anything to truly sour his mood. It was in the middle of the Leaf Village, only a few blocks from the small wooden pier where the two of them had first stumbled into one another's lives, and even now, this part of the town still held some significance to him. What's a Chidori? Naruto asked him a bit later, eyes curious as they met with his own. The Uchiha smirked. Maybe if I can pull this out right here, I can salvage this somehow. Hold on, I'll show you. Sasuke held his hand out, letting chakra gather into the center of it, just how Kakashi had shown him. He closed his eyes, concentrating intensely as he let the chakra shift in nature. First, it flowed to the element he had the most experience using, that of fire, before shifting ever so slightly, becoming lightning in the palm of his hand. Chidori! He shouted. A small spark came into being in his palm, flickered briefly, and then dissipated. His cheeks began to grow hot as Naruto continued to stare at him, evidently expecting something more than that. Is that it? The boy asked, honestly perplexed. I'm tired, okay? He shouted, trying to ignore the horrid embarrassment that fluttered throughout him as Naruto laughed at his suffering. No, please keep going, Naruto exclaimed as he laughed himself into a fit, nearly falling forward as he did. This truly looks to be a revolutionary new technique. Why? Naruto briefly lost himself in his own joke, falling to the floor and lying prone on the ground. Why haven't the Leaf's top ninja picked this up? Yeah, huh? Sasuke deadpanned, looking down at his friend with an incredible disdain. Hilarious. Never before made joke. Oh, I guess you're right, Kakashi taught it to you, so that makes it at least a second-generation technique. The boy pretended to think about that for a moment, before a small giggle broke through his visage once more. DDU, what let him be one of the Leaf's top-ranking ninjas was. The boy's cheeks grew wide as he stood up, getting right next to Sasuke, nearly losing his composure and falling into another fit as he did. Static electricity? The boy barely got out, before exploding, falling backwards and cackling madly. Sasuke was feeling a bit mad himself, looking down at the boy who was attracting more than his fair share of attention and annoyed expressions from the other parkgoers around them. Nine-tailed brat, causing a ruckus, as usual. Why does nice little Sasuke have to be stuck with a loudmouth like him? He must hate the guy. Definitely, they've got polar opposite personalities from what I've seen. How terrible. Sasuke gritted his teeth as he stood up, giving one of the older couples who'd been speaking a glare that would have sent a chill down many adult ninjas' spines. They seemed to get the memo, standing up and quickly seeing themselves to another bench a decent ways away, though far enough that he couldn't pick up what they were saying anymore. Probably some trash about how the nine-tailed brat is corrupting me. Sasuke felt he would have snorted at that if he wasn't so damn annoyed. First with Naruto's own joke, which had carried on just a bit longer than was fun for him, and then with these people, who judged based not off of character, but of history. You know, you don't always have to get so mad. He turned back to look at Naruto, eyebrows raised slightly in surprise as he did. What? Naruto's knowing smile always managed to irk him somewhat. It was an expression that was so terribly unbecoming of him. The boy sat straight up, gesturing towards the bench that the couple had just vacated. They sat down upon it a few seconds later, and Naruto continued. I don't know, it just seems like we've been doing this routine our whole lives, you know? Naruto rocked back and forth ever so slightly, seeming uncomfortable with what he was saying, even if he wasn't willing to back down on the words either. I feel as if you're always chasing people like those guys away. Sasuke's eyes widened minutely. He didn't think his friends saw him glare at those idiots. And I do appreciate it. Naruto shot out quickly, as if fearing Sasuke would take his words personally. Really, I do. But, honestly, after all this time, I just don't think it's worth the effort anymore, you know? Sasuke's expression must have given away how he felt about his friend's words, for a second later Naruto winced, hissing out a breath as he looked away from him and into the center of the park, avoiding eye contact. So what? The Uchiha asked calmly, eyes narrowed as he leaned forward to look the boy across from him in the eye. You think I should just up and give up on trying to get these people to actually consider you as a human being? That's not what I. Just give up on my best friend, throw him to the wolves, and go on like everything's hunky-dory? Naruto coughed awkwardly, trying, and failing to dispel some of the mood clouding around them like a thick fog. You know that's not what I meant. The boy muttered, glaring at him annoyedly as he did. I don't know, it sounded an awful lot like that to me. Sasuke responded, grinning slightly, before sighing, leaning back, and looking up at the sky. It was a relatively cloudless day, with a few small wisps the only interruptions to the endless blue expanse. Don't go saying things like standing up for you isn't worth the effort, because that's exactly what those idiots want you to think about yourself. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked down at him, before a tiny, almost invisible smile blossomed across his features. Honestly, arguing with you always feels so pointless. Sasuke snickered. That's kind of the point, actually. They sat in near silence for the next few minutes, enjoying the light breeze that passed through the park and rustled into the trees around them. Hey, Sasuke? He turned his head to look up at his friend, raising his eyebrows in curiosity. About what you said the other day, about how I should just ignore what everyone thinks, and become the Hokage anyways, Naruto trailed off briefly, looking elsewhere as he tried to gather his thoughts. That really meant a lot. Once more, Sasuke found himself reeling slightly, not having expected the boy to bring that up. Well, you're welcome, I suppose? Naruto sighed in response, though there was still a smile on his face. You weren't supposed to take credit for that so quickly. I don't see why I shouldn't, Sasuke argued, a tiny smile playing across his face. I did, after all, help you out. Wow, and so incredibly humble, Naruto muttered as he rolled his eyes. I am obviously the humblest man alive. Naruto snorted, before he shook his head lightly, and continued from where he'd left off. I never really properly explained myself, back when I was dying on that bridge, and I told you all of that stuff. I still can't really gather all the thoughts that were running through my mind then. That makes sense, Sasuke reasoned, pushing himself back up into a sitting position. You were dying, it's normal for people on the edge of death to get, well, a little loopy, from my experience. Hell, I can barely remember when Itachi. His voice cut out on instinct, but it was a bit too late. His mood instantly soured, and it felt like Naruto could see that too, for he didn't seem to know what to say. They'd been friends for nearly 4 years now, and even now, Naruto didn't quite know how to respond whenever his brother was brought up. Sorry, please continue, Sasuke murmured quietly, feeling bad that he'd steered Naruto's own conversation in his direction. I didn't mean to derail you. No, it's fine, honestly. Naruto held his hands out, but they fell a second later. Clearly, either of them was doing too well keeping the conversation on the rails. But yeah, that actually ties into what I was going to bring up. Sasuke's eyes widened as he turned to look towards Naruto, who had a sad smile in place of his usual jubilant one. I realized it back in the hospital room, when you so fervently rejected the thought that I would give up on being the Hokage. I think, Naruto swallowed, taking a second or two to breath. I think you've been using my dream as a sort of proxy. What? What do you mean? I think the day your brother killed your entire clan, the day your life was stolen from you, you chose to throw away searching for a normal life. You said to yourself, I won't ever be able to catch up to my brother if I make friends, or play around, or enjoy myself, or have a dream. You isolated yourself, cut all ties to anyone else, stopped trying to enjoy your life, and you gave up on your dreams. Sasuke's lips parted, as if he wanted to say something in response, but nothing came out as the boy continued onward. And then, somehow, your magical plan fell apart. Naruto looked over towards him, smiling sadly. You went and made a friend. Several, in fact. Suddenly, the dark and cold life you'd chosen for yourself, that you'd resigned to being kept to, no longer looked so good. But you were determined to keep your goal, at the very least. And yet, even still, there was a part of you that wanted to live, to truly enjoy your life and be with the people around you. And so, you did the only thing you could to satisfy both of those conditions. You chose to dream vicariously through me. Sasuke didn't say anything as Naruto finished, though, to be fair, he didn't feel like he needed to. He was far too busy stuck in his own head, trying to figure out if what Naruto had said was the truth. I didn't even realize, but I don't think he's wrong. Don't get me wrong, I've got no problems with sharing my dream, not in the slightest. Naruto turned towards Sasuke, smiling despite the lingering sadness that seemed to hang around the both of them. But at the same time, there is something that I have to ask you. What's that? Sasuke asked passively, only half listening. Once you train and train and train, every day, without end, and you go and find your brother, once you face him and defeat him, what are you going to do then? What? What are you going to do after your duty is done? Naruto asked, confidence filling his face as he got to the meat of his argument. What is it you want? What are you trying to accomplish past that? You don't know, do you? Sasuke turned towards his friend, feeling stunned as he met the boy's gaze. Naruto wore a knowing look, as if he'd already known what his friend's reaction would be. If I had to guess, the reason you're choosing to live your dream through me is that you don't have any desires outside of killing your brother, do you? Naruto drew his hands onto his lap, though Sasuke didn't miss the way they crumpled into fists. Once all of it's over, you're perfectly content to just stop doing anything at all. You're just going to watch your friends go and live their lives, without ever once worrying about your own. You're going to say I'm wrong, aren't you? Sasuke stopped immediately, having been called out. Yeah, I'm probably wrong on that one. I'd guess what you actually plan on doing is different. Because when it comes to facing your brother, I don't think you even expect to survive. The words might as well have been a punch to the chest, because Sasuke found it hard to breathe as he looked his friend in the eye. The boy's expression was almost frightening. You don't have a dream, you don't try to enjoy your life, and you don't try and make any new friends. You train. And then you hang out with me and Sakura. And then you go back to training. You move in a cycle, never stopping, and it scares the hell out of me. Sasuke breathed in and out, as did Naruto, both of them feeling an odd exhaustion as the conversation continued. I do have a goal, Sasuke argued. I'm going to revive the Uchiha clan. I think you want that too, yeah? Naruto admitted, smiling over at him, before it, like every other happy thing in Sasuke's life, seemed to fade away. But for some reason, it's always a footnote. What? You always mention bringing back the Uchiha clan at the end. Naruto spoke quietly as a group of small children passed in front of them. They were, perhaps, 9 or 10 years old. They laughed and played around, poking and prodding each other as their parents followed a few feet behind them, laughing as well. But first is always your brother. He always takes precedence. Not just over your goal to revive the Uchiha, but over any attempts me and Sakura tried to make to pull you out of the life you seemed determined to have. Sasuke felt a small bit of anger course through him at that. I need to kill Itachi, Naruto. You and Sakura should understand that, at least. Do you? What? Do you need to kill him? Sasuke didn't quite understand the question. How could his friend not understand something so basic, so innately simple, as his revenge? Of course I do, he shouted as he stood up, turning to face Naruto directly. Itachi slaughtered my entire clan, made me watch it all with that damned look on his face. Somewhere, in the back of his mind, he realized that everyone around them had turned to look at the two of them, yelling now as he now was. You think I could just forget about that? Go on and live my life and pretend like everything's normal? It won't bring them back. This time, the metaphorical punch actually did manage to knock him off his feet, though he just barely managed to grab a hold of the bench they'd been sharing, sliding down into the spot he'd occupied a few seconds ago. They can't come back, Sasuke. Even if you kill Itachi, avenge your clan, and come back to the Leaf a hero, your family, they'll still be gone. You think I don't know that? Sasuke muttered under his breath, feeling real rage course through him, directed for what felt like the first time at Naruto. I think you know. Of course you know. What I'm trying to say is, what does anyone gain from Itachi's death? You get to feel better about your family, and then what? Even if you spend all this time to train, let's say, the next 3 years, and you become strong enough to kill your brother, and then you do survive, what then? Then I'll repopulate the Uchiha like I said. And is that what you want? Why does he keep saying this? Yeah, it is. Naruto looked over at him, before sighing disappointedly. Can I be honest for a moment? What have you been doing for the last few minutes if you're only now being honest? Naruto breathed out a laugh. That's fair. But... yeah, go ahead. I think you're lying. Naruto spoke sadly. I don't think you care whether or not you live or die. You think that Sasuke Uchiha, the quiet boy who used to sit in the back of our class those years ago, died when the rest of his clan did. I think that right now, the Sasuke Uchiha in front of me is living for the sole purpose of killing Itachi, of avenging his clan, of having the souls of the dead rest easy, and damn the consequences. And you know what, that's terrifying for me. The boy beside him admitted sadly. My best friend doesn't even care about his own life. You're making an awful lot of assumptions. Then tell me I'm wrong, Sasuke. Because honestly, I'd love it if I was. There was a little piece of Sasuke that had been screaming out inside his head for some time now, even as he listened to his best friend go on and on. It shouted out its own agreement with what Naruto was saying, but also, in a strange way, its words couldn't have been farther from what he was saying. And so, it was with an odd confidence that he opened his mouth and replied. You are wrong. Naruto looked shocked as he turned back towards him, a strange mix of hope and disbelief warring in his expression. I might not care about my own life, that's true, but I know that you guys, Sakura, Ino, and you, all care about me. Now Sasuke rocked back and forth, an uncomfortable redness coming to rest on his cheeks as he spilled out his soul. And if there's one thing I want in the world other than my brother to face justice, it's that the three of you will always be happy. He turned to look at his friend, an honest expression all that he could manage. You guys, for the past 4 years, it's you guys who've made this life worth living. Naruto's eyes widened, but he didn't stop Sasuke from speaking. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it back from my battle with Itachi, but I will try with every fiber of my being to do so, even if it's only to keep the people I care about happy. Sasuke took a deep breath, and found his throat feeling a bit heavy. He realized a second later that there were tears threatening to spill from his eyes. And I guess I'm still trying to find my own reason to live my life. One that isn't just for you guys, or for my family's legacy, but I promise, Sasuke swallowed, trying to keep his breathing in check. I promise I'll try and find that too. Naruto's mouth fell open just a bit, and he turned away a moment later, lightly rubbing his eyes with the back of his sleeve. Neither of them spoke for quite a while, still a bit in shock from the conversation they just had, and when Naruto finally did, it was with an almost croaky voice. "Damn it," Naruto murmured, a watery smile coming onto the boy's face despite his wishes. "Where do you get off sounding so cool?" Sasuke smirked, trying to let his feelings wash off of him, with middling success. "It's a favorite of mine." Naruto smirked at his joke, before taking a deep breath and letting it out over the course of another few seconds. "Sorry I grilled you so hard, You were just worried about me," Sasuke interrupted, smiling over at the boy to show he was, in no way, offended. "I really do appreciate it." "Well, that's good at least." A second later, a low rumbling sound practically split the air apart, and for a moment, Sasuke thought they were under attack. That was, of course, until he turned towards his friend with a glare, looking down at his embarrassed expression, and muttered quietly, "Naruto, was that your stomach?" The boy went red in the face, coughed once, then again, and quietly uttered the words, "I have no idea what you're talking about." There was a brief moment of silence as the two stared at one another. "You want to go get some ramen?" "Sure." "Okay, do you have any jutsu that aren't snake-related?" Her teacher shot her an almost exhausted glare, one that carried no real malice, but certainly a heaping helping of irritation. "Not a big snake fan?" the woman asked, a small smirk adorning her face, even with a small bit of residual annoyance hanging in her eyes. "I've fought way too many giant snakes to ever want the tiny ones coming out of my sleeves, so..." Anko snorted, seemingly thinking back on her own experiences with the things. "Yeah, that's fair. So, do you have anything?" Sakura struggled to find a good word to use. "Regular?" "Wow, super nice of you to say it like that." The woman deadpanned, lightly flicking Sakura in the forehead before bringing out a small scroll from her trench coat. She laid it down on the dirt below them, unfurling it so that she could begin to write. "All right, what is it you'd like to learn?" "That's a surprisingly broad question." "Huh!" Anko laughed at her reaction, which led to Sakura pouting rather profusely, which, in turn, led to Anko laughing at her again. It was a vicious cycle that only really ended once her mentor calmed down enough to keep speaking. "Okay, so, I was thinking back to when I was being taught." "By Orochimaru, right?" "By Orochimaru, yes, and what I can distinctly remember is thinking, like," her mentor put her hands on her hips, imitating what Sakura could only guess was a younger Anko. "Why do I have to learn this? I'd way rather learn stuff that appeals to me, not some crap about snakes, right?" Sakura briefly considered the woman's words, before finding that she did, in fact, agree with them. "Yeah, I guess I do get that." So that's when I had this thought, hey, I'll let Sakura choose what she wants to learn, that way, she'll come out as the ninja she wants to be. Anko winked at her, smirking in the overconfident way she always did. "Sounds good, right?" Sakura found herself smiling. The fact that Anko had actually thought about her, and decided to cater to what she wanted, was more than most of the teachers she'd interacted with in her life had done for her, bar perhaps Kakashi. "Yeah, that sounds great. So I repeat, what is it you'd like to learn?" "Wait, aren't you supposed to be teaching me about the curse mark?" she asked her mentor, feeling as if the woman had simply forgotten about it. To be honest, the woman spoke as she rubbed the back of her neck, seeming practically sheepish, which was an odd look on her mentor. No one, except Orochimaru, I'd imagine, really knows all that much about them, other than that they enhance strength and grant the ability to gather nature chakra. "So, I've kind of already taught you everything there is to know." "That's kind of lame," Inner Sakura lamented. "So, back to my previous question, what is it you'd like to learn?" Sakura thought about that for a while. What immediately came to mind was to become a ninja like Kakashi or Anko, one who worked from the shadows, stealthily assassinating targets, but she dismissed that a second later. It wasn't exactly her style, and she didn't really want to do it all that much either. A second later, an old storybook her mother used to read to her popped into her head, and she said the first thing that came to mind. "What about someone like Hashirama Senju?" Anko's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, which Sakura thought was probably fair, given what she just said. I'm actually kind of shocked you know who that is, the woman said, smiling down at her as if she were a bit weird. Where'd you hear about him? Well, first of all, he's kind of on the village's stone monument, and they teach about all the Hokages in the first year of classes. Sakura spoke as if it was kind of obvious. And secondly, my mom used to read me a story about him before bed, like, every night till I was 8. And are you basing your desire to be like him off of what is said in the book? Enko asked, though Sakura could tell by the expression on the woman's face she thought her story was a bit ridiculous. Well, they say in the book that he was the strongest ninja to ever live, bar none, but I'm pretty sure that's a part of history too, right? Enko nodded. I suppose so, yeah? What else did they say about him in the story? Well, the story said, and I assume these parts was a bit embellished, but it said that he once sprang up an entire forest in a single jutsu. Oh. And that he could heal wounds without even casting, and that he could create a golem the size of a small town, and that he once even fought the Nine Tails all by himself. Enko laughed as Sakura's cheeks reddened, realizing her enthusiasm for one of her childhood heroes was leaking through a bit. Sorry, anyways, is any of that realistic or… If anything, I'd say they've undersold him a bit. Enko spoke with a serious expression. Sakura practically gaped at the woman, who continued a second later. It said that he fought Madara Uchiha, the only ninja who could have ever hoped to best him in combat, to the death, while the former was in possession of the Nine Tails, and had it doing his bidding, and even still he defeated the man. Apparently, he could create a giant wooden avatar several times the size of a small village, though I think an entire forest is around accurate. The healing wounds thing is too, he could heal without any hand signs, he just did it passively. Sakura felt an odd pride at her mentor's words. It was like hearing a close friend being complimented. She'd grown up on tall tales of Hashirama and his exploits. To hear them confirmed by someone of Anko's stature was nice, in a way she couldn't quite describe. So, is that who you want to become? Sakura rubbed the back of her neck, feeling a reasonable doubt worm its way into her heart. I really don't think I can be quite that strong, but maybe just. Why not? Her eyes widened as she looked up at her mentor, who looked down at her with a curious expression. What? Why couldn't you be that strong? The woman asked, taking a seat on the grassy dirt beneath her and drawing a small ink brush out of her trench coat, quickly jotting down a small symbol on the paper below her. You think Hashirama Senju was a prodigy from birth? Kinda? Okay, you're most likely right there, Anko conceded with a nod of her head. But that doesn't mean you can't work your ass off and try and become better. The woman wrote something else on the paper before her, before turning it so that Sakura could see. Let's see, your natures are earth and water, correct? Well, yeah, I suppose. Sakura spoke, not really seeing a point. Hashirama himself had the same natural types of chakra, earth and water. Now, he was proficient in all 5, but it's theorized that his mastery of those 2 in particular is what allowed him to use the wood release, one of the most powerful Kekkai Genkai in all of existence. There's 2 words I've never heard before. Kekkai Genkai? In its simplest terms, the mixing of 2 or more natures into one creates a Kekkai Genkai, though I suppose that more than 2 is technically called a Kekkai Toda. But that's a whole nother bag of worms that I don't feel like ripping open, so for now, let's stick to the Genkai. Sakura was already feeling a bit lost, but nodded to show she understood, at least for the most part. Anyways, whenever a user of the water and earth type shows up, extremely powerful ones, mind you, the Hokage usually likes to try and test if they can replicate the wood release. Anko gestured down towards the diagram below her. It's never worked before, but apparently there's a wood release user in the Umbu, though from what I'm told, he's artificial. Sakura couldn't quite see where her teacher was taking this entire conversation anymore but nodded anyways. Want to see if you've got the aptitude for it? Anko asked excitedly. Sakura's expression seemed to give her away, though, because a second later, Anko once more reached over and flicked her in the forehead. Oh hey! You already think you can't do it, don't you? Sakura pouted. Of course not. Her inner self seemed to scream out. How am I going to do something that's never been done before? I'm not secretly some super special ninja, alright. I mean, I'm pretty sure they said that even his little brother, he himself a prodigy the world has never seen since, couldn't even manage it, so yeah, I don't really think I can do it. Bah, that's quitter talk. It's realistic quitter talk. Just give it a quick try. Here, the woman pushed a piece of paper forward, where two symbols indicated where she should place her palms upon it. The idea is you take a small seed. The woman reached out her hand, and Sakura realized a second later that she was being asked for a seed to go along with this. She reached into her trash bag from when the two of them had eaten lunch an hour or two ago and pulled out the rotting core of an apple. She reached inside of it and took one of its seeds, handing it to Anko. And then, with your right hand, you pour water nature chakra from your right hand into the right side. Anko took Sakura's right hand and placed it correctly. And then earth nature chakra from your left into the left side. She placed the left as well. Or vice versa, and the idea is that if you possessed wood nature, the seed would sprout instantly. Sakura sat in silence for a moment, before interrupting the impromptu exam with an argument of her own. Alright, well, I have a few problems with this test. Okay, sure, Anko nodded, smiling as if she'd expected this. Hit me with them. First of all, what's to say that, even if I did hypothetically possess the ability to use the wood release, that this test just wouldn't work? Sakura reasoned aloud, eyes narrowing as she did. I mean, no one's ever learned wood release since Hashirama, and I doubt he created this exam, so what gives? Actually, this comes from a test the Umbu did on their own artificial wood user. Anko fired back, smirking confidently. They had him do this little examination, and the seed came to life after a few seconds. Alright, fine, that's all well and good. Sakura nodded, conceding that point. Second problem. Yeah? I can't split my chakra into two natures at once like that. Sakura held her hands up, as if displaying her own inability. So, I can't even begin to try this test. Anko seemed to consider that for a moment, gently rubbing her chin with her right hand as she tried to figure out where it was she went wrong. After a few moments of contemplation, the woman let out a single word. Huh. Sakura laughed at her teacher's expense, earning a small huff out of the woman, and another flick to her forehead, though that didn't do much to stop her giggling. Sorry. Nah, Anko spoke up a few seconds later, waving her hand as if dispelling Sakura's sentiment. Honestly, I'm the one who should apologize. I've taught before, but I pretty much just coached Jonin on espionage techniques. Getting better with stealth, hiding their chakra, blending with the environment, that sort of thing. The woman rubbed the back of her head, seeming a bit embarrassed as she continued. I guess I kind of forgot you wouldn't know all that much about chakra control and technique, even if you are a natural at it. Now that had Sakura raising her eyebrows once more. A natural? She asked, surprised at the notion. Me? Are you kidding? Her mentor asked, disbelief evident on her face. Kid, you're better with chakra control than most Jonin I've seen, and hell, a few Jonin if I'm feeling a bit unkind towards them. You've honestly got a pretty good setup for genjutsu, if you felt like using that. Sakura briefly considered that, before shaking her head. I've never really had that good of an imagination. Kakashi-sensei tried to teach me some while we sat around in the land of waves, but I just had a really hard time grasping how to trap people inside something I make. It was weird. Anko laughed a bit cruelly, holding up her hands in surrender a few seconds later as Sakura shot her another glare. Sorry. I just never pictured your downfall being imagination, of all things. The woman calmed down a bit, before asking again. Anything else you'd like to learn about? Well, what can I do with chakra control? A lot, actually. Anko scooted over slightly so that she was sat just next to Sakura, bringing the scroll around so that they could both look at it, and turning it until she got to a blank piece of the parchment. If you'd like, I could go over a few things with you. Sakura felt warmth pass through her whole body at her mentor's words. It was nice to have someone appreciating, complimenting, and paying attention to you. Even if she'd always had her parents, and knew that a lot of others didn't, she'd never really gotten on all that well with the other kids her age, and Naruto and Sasuke had always been each other's best friends first. Ino was a special case of her own, usually helping out with her family's flower shop, which kept her busy a lot of the time. Having Anko around was proving to be challenging in its own ways. The woman could be a bit crass, for starters, but she couldn't deny that she truly valued having someone to give her advice who was actually similar to her, curse mark and all. Yeah, actually. Sakura recalled something from the start of their conversation, and felt like bringing it back up, since it had interested her at the time. You mentioned something called nature chakra that comes from the curse seal. What is that exactly? Anko smiled down at her. Had your interest piqued, did you? Yeah, I guess so. Sakura smiled back, preening a bit under the attention. I just never heard the term before. What exactly is it? Anko smiled, before rising to her feet and offering a hand out to Sakura, which the girl took a second later. Unfortunately, I myself don't know all that much about it. It's not exactly a super well-known art, the utilization of natural energy. That stinks. Sakura muttered, trying to think of something else she'd like to learn, before being interrupted by another flick to her forehead, which had her looking up into her master's face. Anko was smiling widely. Luckily for you, though, there just so happens to be a, well, not expert, but a skilled user of natural chakra in the leaf right now. Really? Sakura asked, turning her head slightly. Who's that? Anko let out a second later, pondering something for a few seconds, before her eyes narrowed, and a devious grin bloomed upon her features. Why don't we go meet with him?